Let's get into it. Soul Not For Sale podcast. We got Joe Rogan talking about all the ways that the elite are trying to make plays for control. And Brett Weinstein brings up something that is so he has such a good way of looking at things. I never thought of it this way, but he was like, people always think of money as being power, but he starts talking about how, money is not the thing anymore. And there are other ways that the elite are trying to control people. And it makes sense when you look at how the world is and what's going on. But the way that he breaks it down is really good. I have too many clips here to go over. We have about 10 clips, but I will tell you this. We're going to touch on currency because that's one way that they try to control people. We're going to go to online surveillance really quick. Then we're going to go to the food supply. Those three things, in my opinion, that's where I want to focus because I think that's where they're trying to control us the most. We're going to have some wild statements from Yuri Ahara, and then some from Nikki Haley, some directly from the Irish voices, the Irish farmers themselves, and then some just from various voices, one of Trump, one of Vivek. We have a whole bunch of stuff. Come with me on this fun ride, a fun content ride. We're going to start with Joe Rogan first, of course, and don't forget about IamCoachColin.com. We got Soul Not For Sale shirts. We got different variations of Soul Not For Sale. We also have Public Enemy #1, very fitting for this episode. You guys know who this gentleman is. Get yours now. Discount code is I am Coach Colin, all capital letters, all one word, one L in the name Colin. Let's start with this clip.
In the public are under the misapprehension that the game is about money. And the reason that we're under that misapprehension is that traditionally money has been a pretty good proxy for power. And what's happened is the game is still very much about power and control, but money doesn't mean what we thought it did.
In what way?
Well, I think we're being set up that your ability to store wealth in money is dependent on rational policy, right? If somebody is going to print money in order to get themselves out of a crisis, then they're robbing you without ever gaining access to your bank account. So the value of what you've stored is under somebody else's control. Now, if you imagine that the power players understand this game, that they know that the way I would put it is this. Money has two values. One is as a means of exchange. Can you buy stuff with it? And money still works the way it always did from that perspective. The other is, can you store your wealth there? And at least with respect to dollars, it used to be the case that you could store your wealth in dollars. But the power players are aware that dollars aren't going to continue to mean what they have traditionally meant. And presumably, they have other strategies for storing wealth in ways that they're going to be able to recover it after whatever happens. I would recommend people, I hope I have the title right, there's a book called The Great Taking, written by an elite Wall Street insider who reveals certain changes that have been introduced into the law that most of us are unaware of. So, for example, there's a change in which you think you own a stock in the way that people used to own stocks. But stocks used to actually have a physical manifestation. You had a sheet of paper that you would put in your safe. And what has happened is you now own a stock and you can cash out anytime you like the way you always could. But if the entity, the underlying entity, goes bankrupt, then you don't actually own the stock. You actually own an IOU, which can be valueless. And we don't know this. In the public, we think we're trading stocks the way we always did. But what has happened is something that had a physical manifestation in which you could have a battle in a court about who owns this piece of paper is now not about a piece of paper. It's about a right. And that right has an arcane structure that most of us are unaware of. So the question is, at some point, do things that you think you own, do rules get revealed to you that tells you you don't actually own those things anymore, and that your financial position is therefore not the one that you thought you were in?
So, what do you think this strategy is about? Like, what do you think?
Power and control.
But do you think that this is the devaluation of money? What's the end purpose of the devaluation of money?
Well,
is it central bank digital currency?
That is a mechanism for the ultimate purpose, which is power and control. And I should point out that in the way I think about things, I take that as an assumption. I'm not arguing that as a conclusion, although I do think you can discover that that is the pattern by looking at all of the evidence about what the rent-seeking elites care about and don't care about. But I would say it is a comparatively safe assumption that it is about control and power because it's always been about that. In fact, evolutionarily, that's really why creatures look the way they do, right? Even, if you take a human being, for example, you're composed of something like 30 trillion cells of 200 different kinds. All of those cells contain the same information, but they all agree to act differently because it's in their interest to not go rogue, right? They could all independently try to reproduce like single-celled organisms. But if they agree to collaborate, they surrender a lot of capability to reproduce. 30 trillion cells can produce a lot of offspring cells. What they get is an increased amount of control over their environment. So that's what evolution is doing by organizing things in the way it is. Its purpose is to put your genes as far into the future as it can lodge them. But power and control is the game, the evolutionary game that is being played. And humans play it differently. And, we go from being a highly adaptable, somewhat technological creature. Our Stone Age ancestors were technological in the sense that they could flint-knap a weapon or a tool, but not highly technological. But nonetheless, the game has persisted as we have become organized into larger and larger social entities, into societies, and it hasn't fundamentally changed now. So what these elites are doing is they are attempting to gain control, to consolidate it, and to arrange to protect it into a future which they see as increasingly chaotic and dangerous. As the people of Earth become aware that they have no plan for the future, that most of us have nothing meaningful to do with our lives, that even the systems that feed us and sustain us energetically are built on rickety premises, they know that there's a reckoning coming, and so they're preparing for it. And what you saw at the Super Bowl, or didn't see but might have, is the distraction, right? The stuff that we are fed so that we'll think about things that other than our long-term prospects in light of elites who, frankly, don't give a shit about us.
Have you seen what happened in Europe with the farmers?
I've been watching that, yes.
Yeah, it seems like they, at least temporarily, have won.
They have won, but...
Let's explain what we're talking about.
All right. Well, maybe you should explain what you've seen. I've watched massive protests of farmers who are increasingly angry and organized about regulations that make farming increasingly difficult, unproductive, and unprofitable.
If I was a conspiratorially minded person, what I would say is what they're trying to do is take over these farms. And the best way to do that is to enact legislation and rules that limit their profitable. Well, first of all, farms are always very difficult to run. They're very difficult to maintain profitability. They struggle. And it's a terrible shame that the people that provide us the thing that we need to survive, ultimately food, that we've done something to these people to make it more difficult for them to do it while it's already insanely difficult. It requires incredible hours, incredibly difficult, highly stressful. There's so many moving pieces just to provide food for all these people. And they started enacting legislation to limit the amount of fertilizer they're allowed to use, to limit the amount of animals they have. I know in Ireland they proposed something where they want to kill a certain amount of the cows because they're saying that the cows produce methane. It's fucking insane. It's not scientific. It's not something voted on. It's not something agreed upon by scientists, biologists, certainly not debated when you're talking about regenerative farming practices, like people that have provided significant options for farming the way, like whatever the issues that they have, where they can actually sequester carbon in the soil and make these farms carbon neutral. It's been demonstrated. It's not theory. It's been done in America. Polyphase farms, White Oaks pastures are two great examples of that, but there's many regenerative farms. It can be done. And for whatever reason, they have decided to enact these harsh limitations on these farmers' abilities to provide food for people. Cynically, when I look at something like that, I'm like, I think what they would do is do that, cripple the farmer's ability to make money. The farms go under. They take over. They control the food supply.
Right. And I hear you working overtime not to see what's in front of you. And I agree.
I'm just being fair.
Yeah.
I'm just making it as... I'm trying to steel man it as much as possible.
Right. But if you take if you take the objective of the game as profit, it's not exactly clear what the end game is. If you take the objective of the game as power and control,
Yeah.
then it's pretty clear.
That's the best way to control the food supply. You just put the farmers out of business.
Who's going to challenge you
Right.
if their ability to eat requires them to embrace whatever nonsense
Yes.
you're feeding them?
And all you would have to do is start some sort of famine and just make it very difficult for people to get food, and people panic. And
Right.
and when people panic, especially people with limited resources and limited financial ability, they concede.
They do.
And that's what we saw during the pandemic. I mean, it was a great test run to see how much control you can really have over people as soon as you have some sort of major issue that everyone globally has to deal with.
Right. Of course, simultaneously, they make it difficult for those of us who recognize what is unfolding to make ourselves self-sufficient. So you see weird regulations against, ancient things like unpasteurized dairy, right?
Yeah.
As if that was some major threat to people or something that you should override their ability to judge for themselves. But the pattern of seeking power and control, if you imagine an antagonist, rent-seeking elites, for lack of a better term, and you imagine that they are, however they get there, completely amoral with respect to us normies. I don't know that they hate us, but they don't care if we live or die. If you imagine that, then you begin to see that major patterns point in the same direction, right? This attempt to control agriculture, which suggests some later chapter in which hunger is going to be used to keep people in line, is consistent with vaccine mandates that were issued in the military, which drove out all of the people who would naturally resist immoral orders, creating a more compliant force. Now, you could imagine that was an accident. You could imagine that public health officials let their fears get away from them, and they mandated these things out of a misunderstanding of the protection of that force. But I think the most parsimonious explanation is that actually a force built of people who take whatever orders you give them is desired for some scenario we have yet to see.
Man, that guy just hit it right on the head. And I mean, I just did another episode where we were talking about certain undocumented people serving in the military and in the police force in order to gain citizenship. And that goes right along with what he was saying. It kind of fits in perfectly. You get rid of the people who are going to resist in certain areas, maybe certain orders. You fill it with a bunch of people who are desperate to have citizenship, so they'll do whatever they are told, and it fits perfectly. Power and control. So let's go over that. And I mean, even just with what we're going to go over, it all leads towards power and control. And it's very odd because we always have this thing where when we look at what the issues are in the world, it's always us that are the issue. You ever notice that? It's always what we do, what we're doing online, or what we're doing in terms of gas stoves and driving cars and eating meat and going on planes and all these things. It's always us. You guys did a little too much of this, and now we got to bring it down. You guys did this too much. You guys are dangerous here. It's always us. It's never them. We're always the problem. We're always the people who have to fix. We're always it's funny because a lot of these entities that are telling us this, we have to pay tax dollars towards them. So we have to pay them for them to tell us that we're the problem, and then we have to change. I don't know. I just noticed that all the time. Let's move on into the clips that we got here. We have a whole bunch of them. Let's start with currency. Now, this lady, Brett was talking about a movie. He was talking about a book called The Great Taking. So it's actually a documentary as well. There might be a book too, but this video is actually a summary. It's from a channel called ITM Trading Inc. So this woman actually does a whole summary of what Brett was talking about. I'm going to play a little bit of it so you can get the drift of what Brett was talking about at the beginning of the clip. Let's go with this.
To get into, we're going to make sure that you have all the important details right now. In his documentary, David details how the debt accumulation cycle that we're in is not an accident, but is rather an expertly executed, far-reaching plan by the global elite to legally confiscate all collateral, all assets. What this means for you is that whatever you think you own outright that is safe and untouchable, you might not actually own, and it might currently be in use as collateral and therefore at risk of being confiscated, all unbeknownst to you. Alarm bells first started going off for David in the early 2000s when he discovered that there was a tremendous amount of money being printed, but it wasn't resulting in any real economic growth. Anytime you have money creation that doesn't result in growth, that's when you have a drop in the velocity of money or the exchange of money. And anytime there's a drop in the velocity of money, it always results in a major financial crisis. That's what we saw in the early 1900s and the 1930s. And we're seeing it again today, with the velocity of money contracting at below Great Depression levels. This means that the system in place is broken and is the underlying reason for so much of the instability that's happening today and will continue to happen. The control system in place is collapsing. When it doesn't matter how much money you create, it's not having an impact at all, that's when the collapse officially has happened. But prior to that, the global elite have to have a plan in place. They have to be ready so that they can retain control. This time, this collapse, the control will come from seizing all collateral. Now, we don't know how long this plan has been in motion, but we do know that it goes back to the 1960s when securities were first dematerialized. It used to be that if you owned a security, you owned a literal, physical, paper-backed stock certificate proving your ownership, whereas now it's all digital records. Hence the term dematerialization. So why is dematerialization so important? Historically, securities were protected and viewed under law as personal property. But over a long period of time, beginning in 1994, changes were made quietly, state by state, to all 50 states, the Uniform Commercial Code, to instead have securities viewed as an entitlement. An entitlement is just a contractual claim to the security, not actual ownership. It's just a contract. So yes, you still have the right to buy and sell, but the securities themselves are held in a pooled form. So you have no real identification and therefore no real ownership over the asset itself. Because of these changes, you now have an account that shows you what you technically have. But your assets aren't there, and they're not with your custodian either. Your bank, your custodian, whoever it might be, they will hold records of your contractual claim, of your entitlement, but the assets don't live with them either. They're actually at a much higher level. That higher level is called a central clearing party, or CCP for short, which is an entity supposedly designed to hold all of these securities to reduce risk for you and me and to make anything touching financial markets more stable, or at least.
Now, I know that was pretty dense, and I let the clip run kind of long because I wanted to actually have her touch on what Brett was actually talking about when he was talking about owning stocks and bonds and essentially them being IOUs. So she was just explaining that in far greater detail. Again, it's a great video. It's like 13 minutes long. I can't play the whole thing, but shout out to ITM Trading. So I guess they're into the like financial space. They're just talking about all this stuff. Very interesting stuff. And I have to say, when it comes to finances, it is something that I have to learn way more about. So all of that was just such a shock to me to really understand, because the wife and I just started learning about stocks and bonds and where to put money, and now it's like, oh, so I actually have to just dig a big hole and just buy a bunch of gold? Is that what I have to do? Okay, sorry. Didn't realize. I guess I just gotta buy chunks of gold wherever I can get them and possibly chip them into little pieces when everything goes upside down. I don't know. But again, I only play that to show the plays for control that are starting to happen. Because when we're in this whole thing, you know, everything she was just talking about, when you own these stocks and bonds and you don't actually own anything, it's just another way of taking something from you. I think when I was talking about BlackRock and the housing market, someone in the comments also kind of taught me something in regards to ownership of land. when you buy a house, how there are little things in place, kind of the same way, like, just little changes over time. Back in the day, you owned some land. And now apparently it's changed to a certain extent where you don't fully own the land. You might own the house, you pay property taxes, but there's some very underlining laws of sorts that have popped up where you don't fully own the land. I don't know much about it, but after hearing this about the finances, what that person said in the comments all of a sudden makes more sense. And again, these are just plays for control. How much can we take from you? You will own nothing and be happy. It's not just like you're going to walk outside one day and they're going to be like, we're not offering for you to buy anything. You can rent everything. Things have to be taken away first. Then everybody owns nothing. Then you can actually introduce the renter economy that they were talking about introducing in 2030. And if you notice, a lot of these things that we're going to be talking about actually line up with the 2030 agenda. All of them have these mandates to have this done by, when it comes to digital IDs, that's actually 2025, shockingly enough. I mean, because that's really close. But 2030 comes up quite a bit. And if you look at the 2030 agenda when it comes to the World Economic Forum, and you look at everything that's happening in the world today, you will see that everything seems to be pointing towards Agenda 2030. That's just my outlook on it. Let's move on to the next clip. This person's talking about digital currency, and he's basically talking exactly the way I'm talking. He's saying that it is the ultimate tool of control, which I agree with, and we have a few more clips on digital currency. This is actually from Sky News Australia. I think this is an Australian guy as well. Let's go. Corey Bernardi. Bernardi, yeah. All right, let's go.
And then there's this push towards a solely digital currency that's happening. We saw a step in that direction this week with the ANZ Bank stopping withdrawals of cash in some of their branches. Now, this is a good decision for ANZ, and I expect other banks will follow suit, but it's not a good decision for us. It also suits the government's move to a central bank digital currency. Let me explain how this is going to work. Cash will be phased out, and that process is already underway. It's no longer accepted for payment everywhere, and a previous government tried to ban some cash transactions and even cancel the $100 note. For those unaware of the history, that was the freedom-loving Liberal government, by the way. Anyway, once everyone is used to a purely digital payment means, they can simply flick a switch to move the monetary system to the blockchain. You will not even notice this until it actually impacts you. You see, blockchain-based currency is also programmable currency. Government could theoretically limit your ability to spend your money in any way they want to. And they'd also have total control over your money. So you get a speeding fine. Why wait for the check to go? They can take the cash directly from your account. What if you go to a meeting for the wrong political cause? You could have all your money frozen, for example. Maybe you put something on social media that's deemed unacceptable. Well, it could be more than just your Facebook account that's stopped. A central bank digital currency is the ultimate tool of control. And of course, there are other confected crises, and the government's proposed solutions, they're all designed to assert their authority and undermine your autonomy. I mean, we've discussed the racist voice proposal at length on this program. It's creating an apartheid state ruled by an Aboriginal House of Lords. We've got this insane renewable energy agenda pushing business and households into financial peril. You've got the incessant changes to superannuation. Again, it's government ruling over your money and your retirement nest egg. Governments collude with tech giants to censor what you can see and say on the internet. They even want you to have a digital ID. This is kind of like a driver's license for access to the World Wide Web. Are you starting to see a pattern here?
Yep. The pattern is, obviously, Brett Weinstein, he said it so many times, power and control. If you go with what the first woman's talking about how they're slowly taking away certain aspects in the taking away what control and what authority you have in the financial sector, and then all of a sudden they introduce some kind of digital currency, and then they couple that with a digital ID, because you can't just have a digital currency. Like, how's it going to be linked to you? It has to be linked to you through an ID of sorts, and that ID, the money's digital. Why wouldn't the ID be digital? So those two things go together, and then it can be something like exactly what he said, how they could just turn certain things off. I've done videos on this, and I've already talked about how programmable this kind of stuff can be. It could get to the point where, again, attach another thing onto this, climate change, where they say you're only supposed to drive X amount of kilometers or miles every single month or every single week. And you've already driven 100. You've already driven 100 miles. And then all of a sudden you go to buy some gas and they go, well, you already hit your 100. You don't need any gas. Well, we'll give you enough to get home. Okay, we're willing to do that. Your home is this far away, but you've already hit your allotment. And then they stop. And maybe you want steak. I want 8 steaks. But again, you shouldn't be eating steak because that's not good for the environment and blah, 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 blah. And the next thing you know, they're like, well, we can give you 1 steak because you already had 2 4 days ago. So you've hit your allotment. We can give you 1 more steak. And other than that, you should probably purchase some alternative meats from the Gates Foundation. Whoever owns it. We'll get into that a little later. But yeah, it gets very, very controllable. Very, very controllable. So, yeah, just another thing I wanted to show you guys there. Let's move on. We're still in currency right now. Just a quick one of Trump, because there's so many things that Trump talks about that he's just so correct about. And when he brings it up, because of how the mainstream media works, it's positioned to just make him sound crazy, belligerent, blunt, too blunt, doesn't know what he's talking about. But slowly we're starting to see that this is kind of a correct line of thinking he had a little while back. This is almost a year ago he said this, maybe even longer.
Our country's going to hell, and we're not going to be the big bar. We have power, but it's waning. In fact, it's waning in terms of our currency. And I'm not just talking about the value of our currency. I'm talking about our currency being used throughout the world.
You want it to remain. You want the dollar to remain the world's reserve currency.
Well, I think it's bigger than losing any war. I think if it doesn't, look, we are already reverting to third world status in many ways. You look at our airports, you look at our terminals, you look at our filthy roads and broken roads and everything else. We're like a third world country. We have something that's very powerful, and that's our dollar all over. But you take a look at what's happening to it now with other countries not using it. And you know China wants to replace it with the yuan. And it was unthinkable with us. Unthinkable. Would never have happened. Now people are thinking about it. That could happen.
So again, the reason I play this is because what Brett Weinstein was talking about is like people think that money is the game. It's like, well, they would never let anything happen to the dollar because they need money for their wealth. Well, it's like they've already transferred a lot of their wealth into other things. Like there's a reason. There's more than one reason why Bill Gates bought a bunch of land. It's because that land, you know, there might be a decrease in what it's worth. But at the end of the day, when you own 250,000 acres of land, that is good. That is better than owning a dollar that's going to decrease in value dramatically. Jeff Bezos, same thing. Buying a newspaper, buying a newspaper that's like attached to like some CIA contract and blah 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 and all the stuff that Jeff Bezos is doing. Like they're already transferring their wealth into other spaces, into other industries, into other assets. But the regular person, they're keeping their money in a bank account. I know I am. Just in a bank account. I don't know what to do with it, really. I don't know. I'm just trying to buy food. Just trying to buy food and take care of the wife, the kid, that's it. But that's what most people are doing. So as it decreases and decreases and decreases, we're all potentially in trouble. And then what ends up happening? I don't know. There could be some kind of bailout. Maybe the bailout will be, listen, we'll make this digital currency, and everybody who has this dollar that's basically worth nothing, if everybody gets this digital currency, everybody's wealth will go back up to where it needs to be. I don't know. I'm just speculating with that. But I don't know. Something's going to happen. Let's move on. Vivek talking about digital currencies real quick.
Digital currency, I believe, is a threat to liberty in this country because it creates a mechanism for the government to be able to wipe out your bank account or wipe out your dollars if you say or do something that the government disapproves of, as you see in places like China. as you see even happen to the Canadian truckers, the Freedom Envoy, losing access to their financial bank accounts. I think a central bank digital currency takes us further in that direction. Well, I explained that to Donald Trump, and I give him a lot of credit for being intellectually open, getting to the bottom of it. He took advice from a couple of other people who he trusted around him. A few nights later, I saw him mention that. And again, last night when he and I were at that rally together, came out strongly in favor of what I believe is the right answer, which is to oppose the creation of a central bank digital currency. A central
Definitely agree, and Trump did come out against all of that, which is a huge thing. I don't think people realize how huge that is, that he's against that, and that, obviously, hopefully he doesn't move towards it at all. He's not coerced to move towards it. There's no other presidential candidate. Actually, you know what? I shouldn't say that. RFK has come out very strongly against it as well, and he was the first to come out against it. So now it's only he and Trump that are against central bank digital currencies. Absolutely amazing. For that alone, that was the first thing that put me on to RFK, where I was like, oh, this guy actually understands. He went on this whole rant about it. It was absolutely amazing. But now Trump is on board as well. I'm very happy about that. Now you're about to hear Mr. Yuri Yuval O'Hara. Yuval Noah Harari. There you go. Sorry. I always mess this guy's name up. Now, what he's talking about is some very wild stuff. He's talking about algorithms, and he's talking about something that he likes to call digital dictatorships. Now, this is, as we move on into online surveillance, this is the cornerstone of what online surveillance will look like. And of course, this is one of the biggest plays for control. If you've ever read the book 1984, you know about a concept called the telescreen. And what Yuri is basically talking about is the telescreen. The huge companies that basically run the world will be able to see you, microaggressions, your eyes moving, your heart rate based on biometrics that they may have access to if you give into that kind of thing. It just gets out of control. Here, listen to this.
Since Charles Darwin, in 3 words: organisms are algorithms. This is the big insight of the modern life sciences, that organisms, whether viruses or bananas or humans, they are really just biochemical algorithms. And we are learning how to decipher these algorithms. Now, when the two revolutions merge, when the infotech revolution merges with the biotech revolution, what you get is the ability to hack human beings. And maybe the most important invention for the merger of infotech and biotech is the biometric sensor that translates biochemical processes in the body and the brain into electronic signals that a computer can store and analyze. And once you have enough such biometric information and enough computing power, you can create algorithms that know me better than I know myself. And humans really don't know themselves very well. This is why algorithms have a real chance of getting to know ourselves better. We don't really know ourselves. To give an example, when I was 21, I finally realized that I was gay after living for several years in denial. And this is not exceptional. A lot of gay men live in denial for many years. They don't know something very important about themselves. Now imagine the situation in 10 or 20 years when an algorithm can tell any teenager exactly where he or she is on the gay-straight spectrum, and even how malleable this position is. The algorithm tracks your eye movements, your blood pressure, your brain activity, and tells you who you are. Now, maybe you personally wouldn't like to make use of such an algorithm. But maybe you find yourself in some boring birthday party of somebody from your class at school, and one of your friends has this wonderful idea that I've just heard about this cool new algorithm that tells you your sexual orientation, and wouldn't it be a lot of fun if everybody just takes turns testing themselves on this algorithm as everybody else is watching and commenting, what would you do? Would you just walk away? And even if you walk away, and even if you keep hiding from your classmates or from yourself, you will not be able to hide from Amazon and Alibaba and the secret police. As you surf the internet, as you watch videos or check your social feed, the algorithms will be monitoring your eye movements, your blood pressure, your brain activity, and they will know. They could tell Coca-Cola that if you want to sell this person some fuzzy, sugary drink, don't use the advertisement with the shirtless girl. Use the advertisement with the shirtless guy. You wouldn't even know that this was happening, but they will know, and this information will be worth billions. Once we have algorithms that can understand me better than I understand myself, they could predict my desires, manipulate my emotions, and even take decisions on my behalf. And if we are not careful, the outcome might be the rise of digital dictatorships. In the 20th century, democracy generally outperformed dictatorship because democracy was better at processing data and making decisions. We are used to thinking about democracy and dictatorship in ethical or political terms, but actually, these are two different methods to process information. Democracy processes information in a distributed way. It distributes the information and the power to make decisions between many institutions and individuals. Dictatorship, on the other hand, concentrates all the information and power in one place. Now, given the technological conditions of the 20th century, distributed data processing worked better than centralized data processing, which is one of the main reasons why democracy outperformed dictatorship and why, for example, the US economy outperformed the Soviet economy. But this is true only under the unique technological conditions of the 20th century. In the 21st century, new technological revolutions, especially AI and machine learning, might swing the pendulum in the opposite direction. They might make centralized data processing far more efficient than distributed data processing. And if democracy cannot adapt to these new conditions, then humans will come to live under the rule of digital dictatorships. And already at present, we are seeing the formation of more and more sophisticated surveillance regimes throughout the world, not just by authoritarian regimes, but also by democratic governments. The US, for example, is building a global surveillance system, while my home country of Israel is trying to build a total surveillance regime in the West Bank.
Man, at least he's honest. At least he's honest. At least he talks about it. And the thing about him is he's doing what he can, having his hand in implementing this type of thing alongside of Klaus Schwab. If you don't know, this gentleman is known as Klaus Schwab's right-hand man. So when it comes to futures and technologies and where it should go and how it should look, Klaus Schwab tends to consult with him, and then they go to the World Economic Forum, and then they bring this to all of the world's elite, which is why when you hear this gentleman talk and you hear these ideas, I don't want to say his ideas are dangerous. I think the fact that he's willing to implement them is what's dangerous. Ideas are just ideas. But it's the fact that he is willing to step into the realm of making it reality that makes it like a little dangerous there. So, Yeah, just very interesting stuff talking about these algorithms. Now, remember, as you were looking at this, you probably saw annual meeting 2018. So he was talking about this in 2018, this algorithm that can see you, that can feel you. Now, if you don't know, TikTok, in their terms and services, there's actually a part where they are allowed, when you're using TikTok, to see your microaggressions so they can help show you things that don't make you go. They can see that. They want you to have things that make you go like this or like that or get happy. So they actually have a technology, which is just your camera, and they look at your microaggressions, your micro expressions, how your face moves. So that's already towards what he's talking about. So that was 2018. He was talking about that. Now we're in 2024, and that actually exists on an app that really came into fruition around 2021, I think. So you can only imagine what's happening with these apps. How much deeper is it going to go? And here's the thing. When he also talks about this, he talks about it in a world where everyone has allowed this biometric detector into their skin of sorts. And a lot of people would think of themselves as somebody who wouldn't go for that kind of thing. And I put myself in that category as well. But I don't know. Maybe they know something that we don't, because slowly I think there are people who are going to do that. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to do that. Maybe you'll have to at one point. Maybe a digital ID and these biometric detectors that have to go under your skin and your digital currency will all work in tandem. And if you don't have one, or if you're not willing to submit to the one thing, you can't have the other things. And if you can't have the other things, you can't buy and sell. And maybe that goes along with the mark of the beast, because you needed to buy and sell. I don't know. But it's just interesting, this world he's talking about, how ridiculous it sounded the first time I've heard this. Because I've been watching this video. I've watched this video at least 10 times in the past 3 years, at least, in length, taking notes. But now all of a sudden TikTok making it real. And then you think of it and you're like, well, who else is going to be calling for digital IDs? And then you see a presidential candidate literally calling for things that could be the precursor to what Yuval is talking about.
When I get into office, the first thing we have to do, social media accounts, social media companies, they have to show America their algorithms. Let us see why they're pushing what they're pushing. The second thing is every person on social media should be verified by their name. That's, first of all, it's a national security threat. When you do that, all of a sudden people have to stand by what they say, and it gets rid of the Russian bots, the Iranian bots, and the Chinese bots. And then you're going to get some civility when people know their name is next to what they say.
Accountability.
And they know their pastor and their family member is going to see it. It's going to help our kids, and it's going to help our country. When I get into office...
If, and you're not going to, you are Hillary Clinton, so that's not going to happen. If you're thinking she is good to be in office, please reconsider that thought process. I'm telling you, not good for America. Now, what she's talking about is a digital ID. She doesn't want to position it like that because they've already tried to position it like that and they received a lot of pushback from people. But what she was just talking about is digital ID. Having to verify yourself to be online is a digital ID. So everything you say can be right beside you as a person, which is going to get coupled with everything you purchase because you're going to be purchasing things online. She's talking about a digital ID. So it's like you hear Yuri or Yuval Noah Harari, you hear him say all that and it sounds ridiculous. And then you hear what TikTok actually has access to today. Today, if you have TikTok, they are looking at your microaggressions. They are watching your face and seeing what it's doing and choosing what to show you based on what your face is doing. And then you hear a presidential candidate actually calling for everybody to be verified online. All of that starts to sync up quite a bit. We're going to move on to the food supply now. We're getting long into this video, but I got to do it. Let's get into the food supply. As Joe was talking about, with Brett. Irish farmers protest plans to cull 200,000 cows. And the way that it goes is they want 65,000 cows culled a year for 3 years. And they would be hitting that marker just before 2030. You guessed it. Elon Musk weighs in. He basically just says that this is a ridiculous thing to have going on. What does he say? I'm super pro climate, but we definitely don't need to put farmers out of work to solve climate change. Not at all. I agree with that sentiment completely. Then we also have this. So we're going to be talking about the farmers basically, but just remember, as Brett was talking about power and control, I'm sure this happened just by happenstance. This is from 2022, the 22nd of April. Okay. This is 5 over the past month. So this is just a few years ago. Over the past month, at least 5 major food processors across different states have burned down or had planes crash into them. Is it a big conspiracy or something nefarious going on? I don't know. But if you think about what Brett Weinstein was saying, if you think of it under the premise that their elites are trying to go after power and control, and then you hear something like that, it has to make you go, oh, how many burnt down? They just burnt down? I wanted to show you guys some videos about that stuff. There were so many. Let me go here. Let me show you guys this real quick. There were so many. It was crazy. There was just so many different stories of these places, from chicken farms, all sorts of things just burning down. There were so many. I was like, I don't even know. I'm like, I can't even, there's too many videos. I can't show that many videos. I would have been at like 25 videos. I'm like, I can't do it. Now, going back to what I just wanted you to think about that, but we're going to go back to what is happening in Ireland. What's actually happening, why this is happening, is something called the Climate Action Plan. It's a roadmap for Ireland to reduce greenhouse emissions by halving them by, you guessed it, 2030 and reaching net zero by 2050. The plan aims to bring about systematic change across society in every community and sector. Sounds pretty good. When you hear something like that, sounds pretty good. I'm on board. And then all of a sudden they're like, so what we have to do is we have to do this to the farmers. And the farmers are like, we're not going to have food for people and we're not going to have work for ourselves. And they're like, that's fine. Don't worry about it. We need to see that happen. And then when you go back to what Brett Weinstein was talking about and you go under the premise of there are people who are looking for power and control, then it makes sense. Because when you think of it, and I'm going to play some clips that are going to verify what I'm saying. Because when you think of it as this is the best thing to do for climate change, you're like, well, this is ridiculous. But if you go, what's the best thing to do for power and control? You go, oh yeah, of course. Put the farmers out of business, obviously. Put the farmers out of business and track what everybody has to do and track what they do online and make sure they have digital ID. Yeah, obviously. But when you listen to what they're saying to you for their reasoning behind this, like Nikki Haley's like, it's a national security. We're going to get rid of the Russian bots. You're going to get rid of Russian bots by making every single person have to verify themselves? Are you crazy? Anyway, let's move on. First clip.
Ireland is proposing a slaughter of 200,000 cattle in order to have cleaner air. Methane from cows is considered a leading contributor to greenhouse gases, but Irish dairy farmers aren't having it, revolting against the country's proposal to kill 65,000 cows a year for 3 years in order to meet climate goals. The proposal would shrink the national dairy herd by 10% at a cost to taxpayers of $213 million annually. The Irish government says the cull would be voluntary. The government would pay ranchers per head of cattle culled as a retirement exit scheme. This is a story unlike many others, but it's not getting a lot of attention from the media. Only a handful of outlets are reporting on Ireland's proposed culling to meet its climate agenda. Conservative sites have offered coverage, while left-leaning media have largely ignored the story. By using this media mist tool on our website, you can see for yourself when the mainstream is ignoring a topic that might not fit an agenda. This story is receiving a lot of backlash, but you wouldn't know it if you follow news from only left-leaning outlets. Elon Musk was quick to condemn Ireland's proposal, taking to Twitter to say killing cows doesn't matter for climate change. Farmers say if the cull is voluntary, it won't meet climate targets, calling the plan a waste. The president of the Irish Farmers Association says that beef and dairy production would simply shift to other countries, causing more emissions elsewhere and therefore defeating the purpose of the overall goal.
See how it doesn't make any sense? Exactly what this gentleman just said, or who they're quoting there. It's going to shift that to other countries, and it's just going to end up, they're going to have the emissions. And it's not like Ireland's emissions and the UK's emissions are just separated by the border. It's not like America's emissions are separated by China's emissions, which are wild. So it just doesn't make any sense to have to do this to just these people. And you're making it, you're going after their food. And it's not just the farmers' food, like they're just feeding their families. They're feeding the country. So you're doing something that's going to potentially affect the food consumption of a country. And you're doing it so the air will be cleaner. You can't make that make sense. You just can't. And it's just, but again, if we say, well, you want power and control. Well, we want power and control, so we just need you to get rid of all your cows, and we need you to take a tremendous hit on your business, and we need society to actually take this hit as well, and that's just what we need. Then it's like, okay, that makes sense. Okay, you want power and control. Okay. But any other reasoning makes no sense at all. Let's move on. This is an important quote from somebody who is in the whole fight with Ireland. Let's move on to this gentleman right here.
Plan for cattle cull to meet green target. It doesn't go into detail about what that revolt means, but if the Dutch farmers, if it's anything like that, then we might see some serious action in Dublin. But the article does quote Pat McCormick, the president of the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association, who says, "We're the one industry with a significant roadmap, and to be quite honest with you, our herd isn't any larger than it was 25 to 30 years ago. Can the same be said for the transport industry? Can the same be said for the aviation industry?" So his point, the cattle industry is exactly the same as it has been for decades, but it's the one being targeted. The CEOs of major companies aren't being told to fly less in their private jets. Billionaires aren't being told to dock their yachts. So this would cost, culling this cattle would cost $200 million, 200 million euros annually, which is about $214 million. So the government basically wants to spend taxpayer money in order to destroy food sources that are economically productive. And as you said, all of this is in the name of stopping climate change. There's a belief, some might say a superstition, that cow flatulence, which contains methane, is causing the Earth's atmosphere to warm. So regardless of where you come down on the climate change debate, whether it's actually even happening, let alone what might be causing it, the fact is that the vast majority of emissions that its proponents are saying heat the atmosphere are not released in Ireland or even in Europe or the United States, where these kinds of policies.
Now, the real thing, I let that run a little long, but what I actually wanted to focus on, it was the fact that they quoted that gentleman, and he was saying things haven't changed in 20 or 30 years. Can you say the same about aviation? Can you say the same about other industries that are also releasing massive amounts of emissions? Maybe not even massive, but they're releasing emissions. And they're industries that are growing and growing and growing. Now, I'm going to play another clip that is going to speak to that as well, because there's actually a gentleman, an Irish gentleman, who actually has a bit of numbers towards that. So let's get on to that one. But again, a good point that he brought up. No one is saying, hey, you Elon Musk. I mean, yeah, maybe he's a voice of truth, but the guy took a private jet on a 6-minute trip. How about you don't get to do that anymore? How about that? How about Taylor Swift is like threatening legal action on this kid who's tracking her jet, and she got to the point where she threatened legal action and then sold the jet, but still has other jets. How about you only get one? You're one person. How about you get one jet and that's all you get? Listen to what I'm saying. I'm just saying you get one. Most people never get any in their whole. Most people only fly on a plane a handful of times in their life. Maybe a dozen, maybe 24 if you're really out there, you're really active, you really get out there. You have a jet, you get one jet. How about that? And how about if you fly the jet, you only fly it for an hour minimum. But if it's anything else, go a different way. I don't know. Or maybe how about this? You guys are all famous and you don't want to be around us, because that's why they get jets. It's not just convenience. They don't want to be around us. Fine. But you get a jet, you share it with, let's say, Bill Gates and Elon Musk and Mark Cuban and Richard Branson and Joe Rogan. I don't know if he has a jet. But you share it with a bunch of millionaires. How about that? Because you know what it is. You just don't want to be around us. You don't want the pictures and the interactions and, the way us normies smell, I'm sure, is very pungent to you. I don't know, man. It's just so crazy that they're never put into question with what they do. None of it. Their I don't know what's it called? Their carbon footprint. Is that what it's called? Their carbon footprints are massive. Think about what your carbon footprint really is. I wonder if there's a way to calculate that. Think about what yours really is. Then think about theirs. And think about the fact that there's millions of people that are that rich. It's not a few thousand. There's millions that are that rich. I remember there's another episode that I'm working on, and the wife was getting some information for me. She said after the Super Bowl, something like 870 private jets all flew away from Nevada. Which means that 870 jets all flew just to watch a football game. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And 2 of those jets probably belong to Taylor Swift. She probably had one jet for her luggage and another jet for her boyfriend. 3 jets. Sorry, Taylor. My apologies. 1 jet for her boyfriend, 1 jet for her luggage, 1 jet for her. It's absolutely ridiculous. Let's move on to this gentleman. He's another dissenting voice. He's standing up against the whole thing that's going on. He's in Ireland right now. Let's hear him out. Turn on your captions. You may not be able to understand this gentleman.
For example, everybody last December got paid their money for Christmas. If you came into the country as a refugee last year, you got paid for Christmas. We as farmers produced food last year and we got no money. We are absolutely skint broke, and we've a minister who doesn't care, and it's got to the stage now of pure frustration. You see it all over Europe. The European farmers are frustrated. Green policy is cutting food production worldwide. It's an absolute disgrace. We're getting blamed on carbon issues in Ireland. We're being blamed as the biggest contributor of carbon, 37%. The emission figures for agriculture are only half the carbon cycle. And if you go back to when you went to school, you learned about photosynthesis, you learned about carbon is sequestered on farms. We sequester more than we emit, and we're getting blamed 100%. We're being forced to cut the cow herd. We have a derogation coming in this year to cut nitrogen use. We're being forced to cut dairy production and beef production in Ireland, while Dublin Airport is going to get a new licence for 42 million passengers instead of 32 million passengers a year. So they're allowed to increase their carbon, and no other sector of society has been asked to cut production of product. You go to any pharmaceutical company, Athlone here is full of pharmaceutical companies. None of those companies are being asked to cut product production. Nobody, except farmers. And we're actually the ones that are carbon neutral, and we're the ones, because we're the low-hanging fruit, we're the soft touch. But I tell you, we're not a soft touch anymore. Go across Europe, you see it all. We're all looking at it every day for the last month. Farmers are taking it no more. We're taking the green policy of Europe no more. There's a nature restoration law coming in. The Article 9, which was to make it voluntary, it's been taken out of it again. So it's going to be compulsory to re-weight low-lying land. If that happens in my case, my farm will be devalued by over €1 million because it'll go underwater. Land underwater is worth nothing. Who is going to compensate us? There is no compensation package for this. It's just crazy what's going on. And I hope tonight this rises up farmers. IFA today are doing a great job as well. They're got out this evening with their tractors in every county in Ireland. And it's great to see Ireland eventually waking up. But we have to stop what's happening. We just have to stop it.
What's it like to be a young farmer?
Wow. So it's funny to see, it's funny. I was talking to my friend, or maybe I was in a comment section, but I said to somebody, I was saying, a lot of people think that leftism, or the left, the issue that we're starting to see is something that is just in North America, but if you raise your head up and you look across the water, you're seeing a lot of this stuff that's causing protests. It's these liberal governments. You're seeing it in Canada like crazy, in America like crazy. There's even somebody saying in Israel that they're dealing with a radical left. There's Europe, Ireland is dealing with it. It's just all over the place. And if you look those people up, a lot of them are in cahoots. Not in cahoots. They're just a part of the World Economic Forum. Just very odd that you keep seeing that. Or they're like financed by Soros, and you know what I mean? Like they're all just cut from the same cloth is what I'm trying to say. So one thing that gentleman said is, and the reason I bring that up is because we're seeing this a lot. He's saying the refugees that came over were paid. Meanwhile, these farmers are getting shafted. The farmers who are there, not just there as actual citizens, but also the people who provide food, they're getting shafted. These refugees come over, they get paid. Same thing is happening in New York right now. I think it was $53 million prepaid debit cards for the refugees, for the illegal migrants that are in New York. That's happening all over the place. It's crazy. It's crazy what's happening. But then another thing he said about how aviation, that it grew, and I'm just going to ballpark, I can't remember the number exactly, but he said something like 36 million, maybe 33 million to 41 million passengers. So the aviation is growing there. There's emissions within that if you're doing it by that much, by 10 million passengers. But none of that gets put into question. Instead, they go after the farmers. And like he said, they're the low-hanging fruit. That's the reason that they're going after them. But again, they're not just the low-hanging fruit. They are the people that provide food. And I've talked about this before. I have a friend. He's going to actually be on the podcast soon. He's actually coming by to see the baby soon. But he's going to be on the podcast. And he talks about, his wife is from Cuba. He talks about that same thing, is that they approached farmers before everything happened in Cuba. They approached farmers and they said, I think it was something, they didn't want to kill all of their cattle, but they said, what we're going to do is buy your land or your farm. Like, we're going to buy your cattle and it's going to be good. We're going to split the profit. Like, they were investing in them. They're going to split the profit or something like that. And the next thing you know, they came back, the government, and they were like, if you slaughter any cattle, you're going to go to jail. And also everything that you make from this cattle, all the milk and everything, we're taking most of the profit and you're getting left with basically nothing. So this has been done before. Things like this have been done before. And obviously, again, go under the premise of this is a play for control and it all makes sense. Go under the premise of this is to make air clean and it makes no sense. Why wouldn't the world's elite, every single one of them has a private jet. All of you stop using jets. You have Zoom. There's some of them that own Zoom. You have Zoom. You don't have to go and do any meetings. Stay home. Remember that? Stay home. Stay safe. Go do that. Do that for a while. And just don't release any admissions. You're looking for clean air, right? Somehow it doesn't make sense. You don't want to eliminate the gas that is coming, the exhaust that's coming out of your plane while you're the only person in it, you and your passengers and a pilot. You don't want to get rid of that, but you want to get rid of food that people actually need. How are we seeing this as anything else other than play for control? This gentleman here, he actually established a new term that I haven't heard before, controligarchs. This gentleman wrote a book. It's called The Controligarchs, and he's just talking about these world elites, and that's what he's referring to them as. And he did a segment with Fox. Let's listen to that real quick. This gentleman, very interesting guy. Let's get into it.
About this all the time. Tell us what you've learned about the controligarchs.
Yeah, that's right, Sean. Most people have heard by now that Bill Gates is amassing large tracts of farmland all across the country. But what they don't know is why a software salesman or how can become a farmer. And it's actually very interesting. Bill Gates has adapted this Microsoft strategy from the 1990s that got it into trouble with antitrust regulators. The strategy was called Embrace, Extend, Extinguish, where Microsoft would enter an industry, the internet browser industry. It would extend its reach, and then it would extinguish the competition. And so we're seeing that right now with Bill Gates's both his land investments and his food investments. He's investing in these fake meat companies. So he enters the farming space. He acts as if, it's just a honest, humble investment. And then he expands his reach, buys up more and more properties, and then he pushes for the regulations that are going to put the farmers out of business.
Putting farmers out of business to what end? Because he single-handedly is going to save Mother Earth?
Yeah, I mean, that's the claim. It's an ambitious goal to save the planet. He talks about the fertilizers, and it just so happens that he owns investments that have new climate-friendly patented fertilizers. So he's cornering the fertilizer market, the food, the land market, and then, yes, through representatives like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, you hear her talk about cow flatulence and why we need to ban cows. You can see in Europe, the governments are much further along in banning the cows. Ireland, for example, is set to slaughter 40,000 cows. You've seen the Dutch farmers have been protesting the new fertilizer restrictions. It just so happens that Bill Gates' investments benefit from these policies that the farmers are so upset about.
So, Seamus, I know you can't look into the mind of...
So I just wanted to play that really quickly because we're at an hour here. We're going a little long. If you're listening until this point, thank you so much. You have no idea how much that means to me. I'm not even going to tell you to subscribe and all that stuff. Just thank you so much if you're still listening. I just wanted to touch on this quickly because he is, as everybody knows, he owns almost, more than 250,000 acres of farmland. And then you don't think about it, but Jeff Bezos as well actually owns not just farmland, but just 420,000 acres of land, mostly in West Texas. And both of them, if you don't know, are invested in exactly what this gentleman was talking about, something called Nature's Find, this meat alternative company that focuses on fungus for breakfast patties and nuggets and cream cheese and burgers and all these different things. This company has raised $158 million from investors, including Bezos, Gates, and Al Gore. The alternative sector has grown 27% in 2020, bringing the market value to $7 billion. So understand that the things that they're investing in, exactly what he just said, the things they invest in, although they seem like social justice type of things, they actually benefit them tremendously. And then all of a sudden, conveniently, the things that were standing the test of time, like farming, like cattle farming and eating meat, all of a sudden those things get all shaky. So I just wanted to show you guys that if we go under the premise of power and control, we can definitely see what's going on. But if you're going to cover your head and slam it into the sand, then maybe you don't understand what's going on. Maybe none of this made sense to you. But just wanted to say that. Let's end the episode there. Thank you so much for watching. You have no idea how much it means to me. And other than that, I'm out.